The morning sun had already filled the diner before I even turned the key. Light bounced off the counter, bright and unforgiving, the kind that exposes every fingerprint and every secret. I had been opening this place for 20 years. The smell of coffee, the sound of plates clinking, it was my rhythm, my heartbeat. That was the morning I saw him, sitting at table 9 before the door had even fully opened. He was thin, with clothes too large for his frame, but his posture was straight, almost dignified. No smell of alcohol, no begging, just quiet stillness. His eyes were tired but sharp, the kind that had once seen boardrooms and balance sheets, not sidewalks. He asked for black coffee, nothing else. His voice was steady, his tone polite. When I placed the cup before him, he whispered, "Thank you." Then he pulled out a small, folded newspaper, yellow at the edges, and stared at it without reading. Something about him unsettled me. Not fear, more like recognition. As if he carried the kind of sadness I had tried to bury for years. I tried to ignore it. Customers began to pour in. Regulars, construction workers, teachers, truck drivers. The usual faces. But my eyes kept drifting to him. He sat still for hours, as if time did not apply to him. When the lunch crowd came, he quietly stepped outside, leaving a single dollar under the cup. The coffee was $3. I found myself following him to the door, not sure why. He was walking away, slowly, his shadow short under the afternoon sun. I called out, "You forgot your change." He turned and said, "No, I did not." The way he said it made me pause. It was not arrogance. It was certainty, like a man used to giving, not taking. He came again the next day. Same seat, same cup, same silence. And again the next. By the 5th day, curiosity won. I asked, "Do you have anywhere to stay?" He looked up, smiled faintly, and said, "Everywhere." And nowhere. There was no madness in his tone, no bitterness. Just truth. I started bringing him a plate of eggs and toast, telling him it was on the house. He never touched the food until I turned away. Then he ate it quietly, almost respectfully, like he was afraid of wasting gratitude. Weeks passed. He never asked for more. He never explained who he was. But sometimes, when sunlight hit his wrist just right, I noticed a watch tan, faint but precise, the kind you only get from years of wearing something expensive. Once, while refilling his coffee, I asked his name. He said, "Names change. People forget them." Then he looked out the window and added, "But kindness stays." That line followed me home that evening. I could not stop thinking about it. I told myself he was just another drifter. But deep down, I knew I was lying. There was something in his silence, something deliberate, as if he was waiting for something. Or someone. The following week, I caught him folding napkins after the lunch rush. He said it helped him stay useful. I wanted to tell him he did not have to, but the truth was, his presence calmed the place. Even the customers started noticing him. The quiet man at table 9 who never complained, never interrupted, never left a mess. One afternoon, as the sunlight poured across the counter, a little boy ran up to him and asked, "Mister, are you poor?" The diner froze. Everyone stared. The man smiled, leaned down, and said, "No, son. I am just waiting for the world to remember me." That answer sent a chill through me. Waiting for the world to remember me. What kind of person says that? Later that day, as he left, I saw something slip from his pocket, a ring. I picked it up before anyone noticed. It was gold, worn but real, with the initials RH engraved inside. When he returned the next morning, I placed the ring on the counter and said, "You dropped this." He looked at it for a long moment, then said softly, "I guess some things always find their way back." He left without another word. But that day changed everything. Because from that moment on, I knew this man was not just another story passing through my diner. He was the beginning of one. He returned to table 9 with the same calm face, but the air around him felt loaded, as if the day itself had taken a breath and held it. I slid his coffee over and watched his hands. They were steady again, yet there was a new caution in the way he touched the cup, like every motion had to pass a quiet test. That ring with RH stayed on the counter in my mind, even when it sat back on his finger. I told myself I would not ask questions. I lied to myself again. The lunch rush hit early. Sunlight washed the room so bright that no secret had a shadow to hide in. He sat and folded napkins, not out of duty, but out of some private code. I began to bring him extra toast, fruit, a refill he never ordered. He never took the food until I stepped away. That restraint bothered me more than hunger would have. A delivery driver came in with boxes that smelled like paper and ink. He set one at the counter by mistake. I opened it to check the invoice and found a stack of local magazines. The top one had a feature on historic properties in town. I turned the pages without thinking and met a photograph that stopped my breath. A brick mansion with a fountain out front and stone lions at the steps, bathed in daytime glare. At the bottom, a caption with a name. Hill House. I looked at table 9. He was staring through the window, but his jaw had tightened, a small change that looked like pain refusing to speak. I slid the magazine under the counter and told myself I would not stir trouble. My hands betrayed me. During a lull, I carried the page over as if I needed help reading. I placed the magazine beside his cup. He looked down, then up at me. That stillness grew thick. He touched the photo with a fingertip, very light. Do you know it? I asked, trying to keep my tone plain. I knew the sound of that fountain, he said. In summer, it made the air cooler. So much weight in that small sentence. Not, I saw it. Not, I visited. I knew. A present tense trapped in a past life. My tongue wanted to dive into 100 questions. My age and the years of serving strangers held me back. I reached for the pot. He set a folded napkin on the table instead. On the napkin, neat block letters formed 3 short words that made my skin prickle. Please stop asking. I slid the pot back onto the warmer. I nodded once. I did not honor that request in my heart. The ring with RH, the mansion named Hale, the posture that did not match a man who had slept under bridges. The pieces were not random. I felt a small shame at the thrill that ran through me, the kind that comes when a puzzle begins to show its picture. A teacher with a class of noisy 5th graders came in and turned the room into a bright parade of elbows and questions. Table 9 hardly moved. One girl pointed at him and whispered to her friend. I watched for a flinch. He only smiled gently and resumed folding, as if he had decided to be the quiet corner in a day that could not stop shouting. The teacher apologized. I waved her worry away and kept plates moving. He slipped out just before the heaviest plates hit the pass. I saw him through the window, walking along the edge of the lot, shoulders square, steps measured. At the curb, a black car idled with a driver who wore sunglasses, though the sun above gave him all the light he could need. The driver did not look at him. The man at table 9 did not look at the driver. That distance felt practiced. He rounded the corner and disappeared. My chest did a slow turn I did not like. I finished the rush and found something under the saucer at table 9. Another napkin. Another neat message. This one had an address, a single line, no name, no instruction. I folded it and tucked it into my apron. I told myself I was being foolish. Then I told myself fools have found truth before the clever ever dared to look. After the crowd thinned, I took a plate of apple pie outside to a man who had started eating lunch on the curb every day. He said thank you like it was a gift he had never learned to receive without flinching. I returned to the counter and stared at the note inside my apron. It heated my skin as if it were a coin fresh from a fire. I did not want to leave the diner. I did not want to stay either. I called my grown child to check in. We spoke about groceries, the water bill, and a neighbor who always borrowed tools and returned them only after the sun had run its course. I kept my voice steady. I did not mention the address in my apron. Protecting my child had taken 1,000 shapes over the years. Today it looked like silence. He came back mid-afternoon. He ordered nothing new. He watched the door more than he watched the window now. When I stepped close enough to smell the mild soap he used to wash his hands in our restroom, I said, "You do not owe me any answers." He looked relieved and sad at the same time, the way a person looks at a train that has arrived with a ticket they cannot afford to use. "You have your kindness," he said. "Keep that. Do not trade it for my history." "That is not a trade," I said. "That is a seat at an empty table." I kept my voice soft. "What is your history buying you now?" He lowered his eyes to the ring. He turned at once. "Silence," he said, "and a little daylight." I wanted to throw the napkin with the address on the table and demand the truth. I did not. I cleared plates that did not need clearing. I wiped a counter that did not need wiping. Self-control is a muscle that aches most when it works. A county inspector came in with a clipboard and a quiet smile. He checked the sink, the thermostat, the dates on labels. He signed the form. As he left, he paused near table 9, tipped an invisible hat, and said, "Good to see you above ground, mister." The man at table 9 did not move. The inspector's eyes caught mine then. and he swallowed the rest of the name. When the door closed, the diner seemed too bright, like the sun itself had turned to face me and ask what I thought I was doing. I leaned over the counter. "Someone knows you," I said under my breath. He did not deny it. He did not admit it. He said, "People know a version of me. Today I prefer the small one." Then he reached into his pocket and placed a thin envelope on the table. He slid it toward me with a steady push. "If I do not come tomorrow, open this at noon." I felt the room tilt. "Do not come tomorrow," I said, testing the shape of the words. "Why would you not come tomorrow?" He did not answer. He stood, thanked me as if I had helped him carry a failing sun across the sky all day, and walked out. The black car at the curb did not wait this time. It moved as soon as he appeared. It eased forward and took the far turn too slowly for a car that had nowhere to be seen. I carried the envelope to the back hallway where the light fell in a pale square on the floor. I held it against that square and saw the faint outline of a card inside. I wanted to rip it open. I wanted to burn it. My hands chose a third way. I placed it under the flower bin, where I kept old photos of my child's school plays and one letter from a person I had loved and lost. Things that hurt and things that healed, all in one hiding place. Day kept moving without permission. By late afternoon, the address in my apron felt like a drum at my waist. I took my break early, told the line cook to watch the floor, and stepped outside. The sky had no clouds, the kind of blue that leaves you without an excuse. I typed the address into my phone, then removed it and read the line again from the napkin, as if the numbers might change if I blinked too fast. The street was only 6 minutes away by car. I walked. I did not want an engine between me and whatever waited. The town at that hour was loud with normal life, children shouting, a dog barking, a contractor arguing with a client on a porch. It did not match the private storm behind my ribs. The address led to iron gates with initials worked into the metal, H&H, mirrored, so precise that the welds looked like handwriting. Inside, a long drive curved toward a house that matched the magazine photo except for one feature. The fountain no longer ran. Dry stone, a basin lined with leaves. Even in full sun, the place gave off a hushed feeling, the way a church feels at noon when the pews are empty and voices do not dare. A sign near the gate read, "Private, no trespass." An old sticker on the post bore the name of a law firm I had never heard aloud, but had seen stamped on letters that got paid before groceries did. I stood outside the gate and looked through as if staring could move time backward and force water to rise again. A voice cleared behind me. I turned. The driver from the black car stood on the sidewalk, sunglasses gone, eyes plain and tired. He held a small card between two fingers. "You have already arrived," he said. "So I will not pretend this is chance. Mr. Hale asked me to give you this if you insisted on coming." The card had a number and 3 words. "Call it dawn." I looked at the sun overhead and felt foolish for thinking dawn had anything to do with birds and soft light. Dawn, for some people, is a time when doors open you do not want to see behind. "Is he safe?" I asked. "That changes by the hour," the driver said. "Your help made it better for a while. That is all I am allowed to say." "I fed him eggs," I said, as if that were a shield. "I gave him coffee. I listened when he spoke, which was not often." "That is why you are the one with the envelope," the driver said. He nodded to the gate. "Do not cross this line today. You will cross other lines soon enough." He walked away without looking back. I stood with that card in my hand and knew 2 things at once. I was in something I could not back out of, and I did not want to back out anyway. By the time I returned to the diner, 2 men in pressed shirts were waiting at the counter with water glasses they had not touched. Both had the posture of people who expect doors to open. Their smiles did not match the heat in their eyes. "We would like to ask about your friend at table 9, the taller one said. He showed me nothing official. He did not need to. Power sits in a voice long before it sits in a badge. "I have many friends," I said. My tone came out lighter than I felt. "Not this kind," he replied. His partner placed a business card on the counter with a logo embossed into it like a threat whispered under a compliment. "There are assets," the tall one said, "and there are claims. He is part of both." I felt my years like armor and like weight. I leaned on the counter as if it were a rail above a long drop and said, "I serve coffee. If you have questions, bring papers. Until then, order a meal or please free the stools." They did not blink. One of them glanced toward the back hallway, toward the flower bin, toward the envelope that waited like a fuse. Then they stood, adjusted their cuffs, and left without a word. I looked at the clock. The hands moved in bright silence. Noon tomorrow would come whether I slept or did not. The envelope under the flower would hold its breath until my fingers split it open. The address on the napkin had led me to a gate with initials that matched a ring, and a driver who spoke like a man paid to watch other people fall. When the last customer left and day began to lean toward late afternoon, I locked the door, turned the chairs, and pressed my palm to the flower bin. I had no right to be scared of paper. I had no right to hope the paper could fix a life. I did. The light in the room grew softer, but the truth stayed sharp enough to cut. Tomorrow at noon, I would break the seal. If I did not, the day would break me instead. He took the cup and thanked me, and when he stood to stretch his legs, something slid from his pocket and stopped under the sugar tray. I reached across the counter and felt paper between my fingers, thick, not the kind that folds easy. I lifted it into the light. A woman stared back in bright daylight, hair pinned neat, mouth set in a line that would never ask for pity. Behind her stood tall columns and wide courthouse steps. A bronze plaque caught the sun. Someone had written a faded date in the corner, 10 years ago. Yet the photo felt alive, as if the light in it had leaked into the room. He returned and saw it in my hand. A flinch, brief but sharp. He reached out, not grabbing, just asking. I placed it on his palm. His thumb traced the border like it might cut him. Family? I asked. My voice sounded calm. My heartbeat did not. He shook his head once. Refusal, not denial. He slid the photo back into his pocket, folded his hands, and stared at the counter. I moved through the motions, plates, coffee, tips, laughter that sounded forced, but my eyes kept returning to that pocket. The woman's stare lingered in my mind, strong but sad. The courthouse behind her looked heavy, like a place where truth had been measured and sold. Around noon, the diner owner came in with sunglasses pushed up on his head and an irritation that arrived before his words. He glanced toward table 9, then motioned for me to follow him to the kitchen. The smell of fried onions clung to the air. This place is not a shelter, he said. We serve paying customers. He pays, I replied. Not in cash, but in quiet. The room behaves when he's here. The owner leaned closer. Yesterday, 2 men came by asking questions. Suits, watches, city accents. They wanted to know who talks to him, who feeds him, what he leaves behind. They were not friendly. I am warning you, stop helping him. Stop, I said. That easy. He sighed. I cannot protect you if this turns ugly. Whatever he's hiding, I want it nowhere near my business. I felt something old rise in me, the kind of anger that grows when people dress fear as caution. He is not trouble, I said, and I do not need your protection. He looked at me for a long second, the kind that tells you a bridge just cracked. You're risking your job for a stranger. Then maybe it is time to see what that risk buys, I said. He walked off shaking his head. The friar hissed like it agreed with him. I returned to the counter, but the day felt longer. During a lull, I brought toast to table 9. He looked at it, then at me. You carry too much, he said. Do not carry my choices too. I carry what I decide to, I answered. And right now, I decide on toast. A hint of warmth flickered in his eyes before vanishing. He took one bite, small and careful. Then he slid a folded slip toward me. I did not open it until he left. 3 words, no courthouse today. So it was not an accident. The photo had fallen for a reason. The courthouse was not a building, it was a wound. Later, a box of local magazines arrived. I flipped one open, and there it was, the same courthouse, printed in color beside an article about historic properties. On the next page, a mansion photo, Hale House, captioned beneath a fountain gone dry. My stomach tightened. Hale, the same initial on his ring. He finished his coffee and approached the counter. Thank you, he said, for speaking kindly when no one else does. He placed exact change, then lifted the corner of the photograph just enough for me to see the woman's face again. She knew the law better than the men who enforced it. I said nothing. He walked into the sun and vanished into its glare. When I wiped table 9, I found a torn newspaper clipping under the napkin holder. A headline about a hearing, property fraud, forged deeds, contested signatures. The date matched the one written on the photograph. Below it, a single name, Evelyn Hale. My hands trembled. The last name on the ring, H. The same as the mansion, the same as the woman in the photo. I slipped the clipping into my apron before anyone noticed. Paper feels harmless until it cuts. The owner watched me from the register. The room buzzed with small talk and clinking forks. But under it all, tension moved, quiet, invisible, patient. The nurses laughed at a joke I did not hear. A contractor asked for more sugar. I smiled, but my face felt made of glass. Mid-afternoon, the owner came again. "I need a choice," he said. "Him or your job." I met his stare. "If you fire me for kindness, the story will spread faster than your coffee burns." He exhaled, walked away, and slammed the office door. The sound carried finality, but not peace. By closing time, the clipping in my apron had rubbed my skin raw. I wiped down the counter, counted spoons twice, and caught myself staring at table 9, half expecting him to return. He did not. Still, something had shifted. The woman in the photo was not a ghost. The man at table 9 was not just a drifter. The courthouse behind her, the date, the name, all of it was a thread waiting to be pulled. I told myself I would leave it alone. I knew I was lying. The gates at the address stood half open, as if waiting for someone who had forgotten to come home. Paint peeled from the iron, vines twisted through the bars, and sunlight bounced off the windows of the mansion beyond. All glare, no warmth. I hesitated at the edge of the drive, the kind of hesitation that belongs to trespass and truth alike. The place looked deserted, but I could smell dust even from the gate. Old dust, mixed with something faintly metallic, like coins or regret. I stepped inside. Gravel cracked under my shoes. The house was larger than it seemed in the magazine photo. The fountain in front was silent, the basin filled with leaves and a single bird feather, white as surrender. The front door hung slightly open. Curiosity pulled harder than caution. Inside, the light poured through wide hall windows, falling across furniture draped in white sheets. Every step stirred dust that rose in small ghosts. A staircase curved upward, grand and empty. On the wall, faint outlines showed where paintings had once hung, rectangles of cleaner plaster, the shadows of wealth. On a table near the stairs, a folder lay open, edges curled from damp air. The top page bore a heading in legal print. Hale Estate Transfer, Case Reference 14, B/23. My throat tightened. Hale again. I turned the pages. Each one spoke of loss disguised as legality. Titles, deeds, transfers, signatures. The same signature repeated at the bottom of every page. Richard A. Hale. The ink looked forced, like a hand pressed down by more than a pen. Another page told the rest. Sale of property assets to Hale and Whitman Partners. Settlement closed within 7 days. All rights relinquished. At the bottom, a signature that did not match the others. A forgery, maybe, or a betrayal written neatly enough to pass for business. Beside the folder lay a broken picture frame. Inside it, half a photograph. The missing half matched the woman from the courthouse picture, Evelyn Hale. On the remaining half, Richard stood beside her, smiling in daylight that felt like another lifetime. My chest burned. He had not fallen. He had been pushed. Footsteps broke the silence behind me. I turned too fast. The driver who had given me the card stood near the doorway, hat in hand. "You should not be here," he said. I needed to see what he lost. He sighed. He did not lose it. It was taken. The partners falsified documents after his wife died. By the time he learned, it was too late. Lawyers feed on time, and he had none left to fight. Why would he live near what was stolen from him? I asked. "Because ghosts do not travel far," he said quietly. He came here sometimes. Sat by the gate. Watched the fountain that would not run. I closed the folder and handed it to him. "This belongs to him." He looked at the pages, then at me. "He left these behind for a reason. Maybe for you. He said someone still honest might need them soon." I stepped out into the bright day, squinting as the sunlight hit. For the first time, it did not feel warm. The mansion watched as I walked away, silent, tired, patient, like an old secret waiting to breathe again. By the time I reached the main road, I already knew the truth I would pretend not to know when I returned to the diner. Richard Hale was not homeless by fate. He was the man who had owned half the skyline, stripped of it by people who smiled while they signed his ruin. I kept the folder under my arm all the way home. It felt heavier than paper. The envelope arrived on a Monday, thick enough to demand attention. My name was typed in black, precise letters. The return address belonged to a law firm I had never dealt with, but had seen stamped on the side of that mansion's gatepost. My stomach sank before I opened it. Inside lay a single-page notice with 3 sentences that changed everything. You are requested to appear as a witness in the matter of Hale versus Whitman Partners. Your testimony pertains to the period in which Mr. Richard A. Hale resided at the diner property. The letter did not ask. It ordered. I read it twice, then again. So the name had weight now. Richard A. Hale. No longer a mystery at table 9. No longer a ghost folding napkins. The diner owner saw the paper trembling in my hands and frowned. You got yourself tangled, he said. Do not drag this place down with you. He has a right to the truth, I said. Truth is not what courts buy, he replied. They buy whoever can talk longer. But his voice faded as I stared at the letter. A part of me wanted to burn it. Another part wanted to walk into that courtroom and say everything I knew. The ring, the photo, the forged signatures, the quiet dignity of a man who had already been stripped of everything but his manners. That evening, I visited the address printed on the paper. The firm's building stood tall, glass gleaming in daylight. Inside, the receptionist led me to a meeting room colder than honesty. A man in a gray suit entered, his eyes sharp as ink. You are the witness who served him coffee, he said. Mr. Hale trusts you. Trust is a heavy thing, I said. He handed me a folder. Inside is your statement. Read, sign, and return. Court date is next week. I opened the folder. The statement was neat, too neat. It framed Hale as unstable, suggesting he had imagined the forgery, that his grief had blurred reason. They wanted me to confirm his confusion, to bury him again under their version. This is not true, I said. It is the narrative that protects the firm, he replied. If you cooperate, we will not involve you further. I pushed the folder back. Then involve me. He studied me for a long time. You are a waitress. What do you gain by standing in a storm that is not yours? I lose less than you think, I said, because I still have my name. When I left, daylight hurt my eyes. Outside, a black car waited. The same driver stepped out, opened the door, and said softly, he asked for you. Richard sat inside, clean-shaven, wearing a worn suit that still carried grace. His voice was quiet. They will try to rewrite me. Do not let them. Why me? I asked. Because you saw me when I was invisible, he said. That makes you dangerous to them. He handed me another envelope, smaller this time. Inside was a single page, a copy of the original deed to the mansion, bearing his true signature and the forged one side by side. Keep it safe, he said. If they destroy mine, yours might be the last left. Before I could speak, the driver started the engine. The car rolled away, leaving the smell of old leather and new fear. The next morning, I took the letter, the deed, and my courage, and placed them inside a metal box under my bed. I sat there for a while, thinking of how many truths in the world depend on a single signature, and how easily hands can betray them. When I returned to the diner, table 9 was empty again. The sun through the window made the surface shine like glass, clean and hollow. Somewhere, men in suits were preparing their stories. And I was preparing mine. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and tension. I sat behind Richard as the room filled, reporters whispering, cameras clicking, lawyers rustling their papers like swords before a duel. The same building from the photograph now stood alive around me. Light flooded through high windows, honest and cold. When the judge entered, silence fell so heavy it almost broke the air. The clerk called the case. Hale versus Whitman Partners. The name echoed through the room like a ghost that had been waiting years to hear itself again. Richard sat upright, shoulders steady. The lawyers on the other side wore calm smiles, the kind people practice in mirrors. Their lead counsel, Mr. Whitman himself, rose first. His voice was smooth, his tone patient. My clients sympathize with Mr. Hale's unfortunate circumstances, he said. But the evidence will show that his accusations stem from grief, confusion, and emotional instability, not fact. The words hit like soft blows. Every sentence painted Richard smaller, a man lost in delusion, a mind cracked by loss. They showed the court forged photographs, altered contracts, and psychiatric evaluations twisted to imply he had been unfit to handle his affairs. Each exhibit built a cage around him, bar by bar. Richard did not flinch. He looked down at his hands, calm as still water. When his lawyer stood, the rhythm changed. The defense would have you believe my client imagined the theft of his own life's work, she said. They will not mention that the same partners transferred property to offshore accounts within a week of his wife's death, or that they forged his signature. We will. Her words cut through the quiet like glass breaking. Then she called me to the stand. The judge asked me to state my name and occupation. My voice shook at first, but steadied as I looked at Richard. I told them about the diner, about the man who folded napkins, who spoke gently, who carried dignity even in ruin. I told them he never begged, never raged, never broke. He remembered details of contracts, dates, partners, legal phrases. I described the documents I had found, the folder, the identical signatures, the mansion that bore his name. The opposing counsel rose for cross-examination. You are not a lawyer, he said. Not an expert in property law. You are a waitress. I am someone who reads people for a living, I said. And I know when someone is telling the truth. He smirked. Truth, miss, can be subjective. So can greed, I said. A few in the audience gasped quietly. The judge called for order. The lawyer smiled as if he had caught a child speaking out of turn. You have developed a friendship with Mr. Hale, he said. Would it be fair to say your testimony is driven by sympathy? No, I answered. It is driven by conscience. He paused, searching for another angle, then changed tone. Do you have proof that this folder of documents was genuine? That it was not fabricated by Mr. Hale himself in his unstable state? The folder was produced. The courtroom lights reflected off the glass cover. I pointed to the ink differences, to the slant of the forged signature. That line was drawn by a different hand, I said. A machine could tell, but so could a waitress who has watched hands all her life. Laughter rippled softly through the crowd. Even the judge's eyes flickered with amusement before he masked it. The defense lawyer sat down, frustrated. But as the day went on, something in the courtroom began to shift. A witness for the opposition, a clerk from the law firm, stumbled under questioning. He hesitated when asked who authorized certain transactions. A bead of sweat slid down his temple. Then he looked at the partner's table. Too long, too nervous. Someone inside the courtroom was lying. The judge called a recess. Outside, reporters surrounded me, shouting questions I did not answer. Richard's lawyer pulled me aside. You changed the rhythm in there, she said. The jury heard sincerity, not strategy. But something is off. Someone on the inside knows more than they are admitting. When we returned, the clerk who had faltered was gone. Replaced. The defense brushed it off as illness. Richard looked toward the empty chair, his face unreadable. I felt the tension coiling tighter, like a wire pulled close to snapping. The judge called the next witness. And when I saw who stepped forward, my stomach dropped. It was the diner owner. He took the oath with a steady voice, his uniform pressed, his eyes darting once in my direction before fixing on the judge. My chest tightened. I had expected fear, maybe guilt. What I saw instead was resolve, but not the kind born from courage. The kind bought by someone else's wallet. The defense lawyer approached him with familiarity. Too much familiarity. Mr. Grant, he said, you own the diner where Mr. Hale spent considerable time, correct? Yes, he replied, voice even. He was there almost every day. Would you describe his behavior as normal? The owner hesitated, glanced at the partner's table, then said, no. He often spoke to himself. He claimed people followed him. Sometimes he shouted in his sleep in the booth. It felt like the floor vanished beneath me. Lies, polished and deliberate. The courtroom murmured. Richard's head remained bowed, unmoved. The defense lawyer smiled, pretending sympathy. So, in your professional opinion, would you say he appeared unstable? Yes. And the waitress exaggerated everything, he said, looking at me directly now. She wanted attention. She kept saying he was some important man, that he'd been wronged. I told her to stop. She would not listen. A spark of fury burned behind my ribs, but I forced stillness. The judge looked toward me, then back at him. Did she fabricate the documents? The defense pressed. I would not know, he said, shrugging with false humility. But she handled them before anyone else did. The implications sank like poison. The lawyer turned to the jury. Thank you. No further questions. My turn came. I stood slowly, met his eyes, and asked, do you remember the morning you threatened to fire me for helping him? His jaw tightened. I do not recall. You said 2 men came asking questions. Men dressed just like the one sitting there now, I said, pointing at the partner's table. Did they pay you then or later? The defense objected. The judge overruled. I pressed on. You told me not to feed him. You said you could not protect me if it turned ugly. Was that concern or an instruction from them? He shifted. Sweat darkened the collar of his shirt. You are twisting words. I am repeating them, I said. He looked at the defense table again, searching for rescue. I may have been mistaken, he stammered. I only wanted peace in my establishment. Then why did you call their office 2 days before the hearing? I asked. The courtroom froze. The call record is attached to my subpoena. His face drained of color. The lawyer objected again, louder. The judge silenced him. Answer the question. The owner swallowed. They offered compensation for lost business, he muttered. Compensation for truth? I asked. He said nothing. The silence that followed was long enough to change everything. The jury watched him sweat. The judge's expression hardened. Richard's lawyer leaned forward, whispering to her assistant, eyes alive with new purpose. When the owner left the stand, he avoided my gaze. I felt no triumph, only a dull ache. Betrayal, when it wears a familiar face, cuts deepest. During recess, Richard's lawyer told me the impact was huge. The jury had seen corruption creep out into daylight. But there was more to uncover. If they paid him, she said, they paid others. Someone closer to the firm. That night, I sat outside the courthouse steps under a sky too bright for peace. Reporters hounded the exit, flashes slicing through the air. Richard approached quietly, his voice low. Betrayal does not surprise me anymore, he said. But courage still does. I smiled faintly. Do not thank me yet. They are not finished. He looked up at the courthouse, where the flag fluttered lazy in the heat. Neither are we, he said. The next morning, the papers called it the Waitress versus the wealthy. But inside the courtroom, the war had only begun. A whisper reached us that one of the partners planned to flee the country. And somewhere in the pile of evidence, a new folder waited. One that could either free Richard Hale or destroy both of us. 2 days after the diner owner's testimony collapsed, I returned to the diner to collect my things. I had not planned to go back. Too many memories lingered in the air, heavy as unspoken truths. But when I opened the back door, I found the lights still humming, and the faint smell of coffee, stale, familiar, loyal. The storage room sat behind the pantry, a narrow space lined with shelves of old menus and broken crockery. I went in to fetch a box for the trial papers. When I reached the far corner, my foot struck something metallic. I knelt, brushed away dust, and saw it. A battered brown briefcase with a rusted clasp. The initials were faint but clear, R.H. My breath caught. Richard's briefcase. The one I had never seen him carry. I dragged it out, set it on the counter, and wiped off the years. The clasp snapped open with a brittle sound. Inside lay papers, dozens of them, stacked neatly, yellowed around the edges. On top rested a folded envelope marked to whom it may concern. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a typed confession. The words struck like lightning in daylight. I, Daniel Whitman, acknowledge that the partnership transfer from Richard A. Hale to Hale and Whitman was executed under fraudulent pretenses. The deed was altered after his signature was obtained. His wife, Evelyn Hale, discovered the forgery and intended to expose us. Her accident was no accident. My knees nearly gave out. I sat down on the cold floor, reading the rest. It detailed payments, shell companies, bribed accountants, every dirty secret spelled out with precision. And at the end, a signature, Daniel Whitman, witnessed by 2 names I did not recognize. The paper was dated 3 years earlier. The weight of what I held made the air feel thinner. This was not just evidence. It was confession, the weapon that could end the trial and expose everything. I gathered the documents, locked the diner, and hurried straight to Richard's lawyer. She read the first page, then the next, and by the third, her voice was shaking. Where did you find this? In the diner's storage, I said. He must have hidden it there when he still trusted the place. She looked at me with awe and fear mixed. This is the missing link. The file we could never prove existed. Whitman's guilt in his own words. Richard arrived soon after. When he saw the briefcase, his hands hovered over it before touching. His voice broke for the first time. I thought they burned everything. They tried, I said softly. But the truth hides where greed forgets to look. He exhaled, eyes wet. You have done more than any lawyer could. I shook my head. I just cleaned a room. No, he said. You cleaned a lie. The lawyer called an emergency motion to reopen evidence. The court clerk's disbelief turned into urgency once he saw the confession. The judge scheduled the continuation for the next morning. That night, I could not sleep. Every sound outside felt like footsteps coming for the briefcase. I hid it under the bed, then moved it to the closet, then back again. My mind replayed the line her accident was no accident. I imagined Evelyn Hale, strong and unflinching, realizing too late that the men beside her would kill to keep their names clean. Morning arrived cruelly fast. I carried the briefcase like it contained both justice and ghosts. When we entered the courtroom, the defense looked relaxed, unaware that the tide had already turned. Richard's lawyer approached the bench, requested permission to submit new evidence, and placed the confession before the judge. The courtroom froze. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward like vultures catching the scent of blood. The judge read in silence. Then he looked up, his face pale with restrained anger. "Mr. Whitman," he said, voice hard as stone, "this document bears your name. Do you deny writing it?" Whitman's face went gray. "Forgery," he muttered. "It is a fabrication." "Then you will not object to forensic verification," the judge replied. The room erupted in murmurs. Richard turned toward me, eyes full of quiet gratitude. For the first time, he smiled. "They cannot bury it now," he whispered. But I felt something else in the air, panic. The defense table buzzed with whispers, phones pulled out, assistants rushing in and out. The truth was no longer caged. It was running wild through the room, sharp and unstoppable. The briefcase that once carried a man's downfall had become the very thing that could restore his life. And the men who thought they owned daylight were suddenly afraid of it. The next morning, the courthouse felt different, louder, hungrier. Reporters crowded the steps, microphones thrust forward, news vans parked like vultures circling a wounded animal. Headlines already screamed about a confession that could dismantle an empire. Inside, the air vibrated with anticipation. Whitman sat pale and rigid, his tie slightly askew, eyes darting between his lawyers. Richard sat calm, almost serene, as if he had already seen this day in a dream he never dared to believe. The judge entered and called the session to order. "We will resume the matter of Hale versus Whitman partners, considering new evidence." His tone was clipped, controlled, the kind used when control is fragile. Richard's lawyer began. "Your Honor, the confession found in Mr. Hale's possession outlines a conspiracy that reaches beyond this courtroom. It implicates multiple parties, some present, some hidden behind legal walls." She handed copies of the confession to the clerk, who distributed them. The rustle of papers filled the room like wind before a storm. Whitman's lead counsel objected immediately. "This is inadmissible. It lacks verified witnesses." The judge glanced at him. "And yet, Mr. Whitman's own handwriting analysis confirms a 98% match. Would you like to argue against science?" The courtroom fell into a hush. The defense lawyer's jaw flexed. "My client was coerced," he said. Richard's lawyer smiled faintly. "By whom?" "His conscience." Laughter rippled through the crowd. The judge banged the gavel once. "Order." Then Richard's lawyer opened another folder. "We have additional documentation linking payments from Hale and Whitman to accounts belonging to city officials. The funds were transferred 2 days after Mrs. Hale's death. These are the same officials who approved the fraudulent property deeds." That sentence detonated the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. Jurors exchanged shocked glances. Even the bailiff shifted uncomfortably. Whitman's lawyer tried to recover. "These accusations are baseless." But before he could finish, a junior partner from their firm stood up suddenly, face flushed. "Enough," he blurted out. "They are not baseless." The room gasped. The judge gestured for him to continue. The young lawyer's voice trembled. "We were ordered to destroy those files. Whitman said if anyone spoke, careers would end. But the payments are real." The officials signed off knowing everything was forged. Whitman rose, shouting, "You will regret this." The judge's gavel slammed down. "Sit down." But the damage was done. The confession, the bank records, the witness, all collided into one unstoppable wave. The prosecutor, now involved at the judge's request, demanded Whitman surrender his devices. Whitman refused. Marshals moved forward. Cameras clicked like machine guns. Reporters shouted questions over one another. Whitman's lawyer tried to plead temporary recess, but the judge denied it. You will remain until these documents are verified. Then, in the middle of the chaos, Whitman broke. His voice rose, desperate and raw. You think you know what corruption is? You have no idea how deep it goes. The mayor, the planning board, half the city's legal office, all took their share. And when Evelyn threatened to expose it, they silenced her. We only followed orders. The courtroom exploded. People shouted, reporters surged forward, flashes stung the air. The judge ordered security to restore order, but no one could unhear what had been said. The secret had burst like a dam. Richard sat motionless, his hands clasped tightly. When Whitman's voice cracked into silence, Richard turned to the jury and said quietly, "My wife died believing truth still mattered. I hope she was not wrong." The judge called recess amid chaos. Outside, the courthouse steps turned into a war zone of microphones and cameras. News anchors spoke into live feeds. Massive corruption scandal unfolds inside City Court. Richard Hale's case exposes conspiracy reaching government offices. Inside, I sat in the witness hallway, hands trembling, watching the door where everything had unraveled. The world was finally seeing what I had seen all along, a man broken not by madness, but by betrayal. And for the first time, I did not feel like a waitress in someone else's story. I felt like part of the truth that could no longer be buried. Months later, sunlight spilled through the diner windows just as it had before any of this began. The tables gleamed again, customers talked about ordinary things, and life wore its quiet mask of normalcy. I had reopened, not because I needed the income, but because the place reminded me who I was before truth became a battlefield. One afternoon, the bell over the door rang, a sound that once meant little but now carried the weight of memory. 4 men entered first, dressed in dark suits, moving like shadows that knew their purpose. Behind them came a man in a gray coat, clean, calm, his presence controlled yet polite. He introduced himself as one of Richard Hale's attorneys. "He asked me to deliver something," he said, placing a thick envelope on the counter. The paper was heavy, the seal embossed with Richard's initials. My hands hesitated. "Is he?" The lawyer nodded once. "He passed peacefully 2 weeks ago. In his final letter, he said there were debts only kindness could repay." He gestured, and one of the bodyguards handed over a second folder. Inside were documents stamped and notarized, each page bearing my name. Deed of ownership, the diner, all assets transferred to me. He signed it the morning before the verdict was read, the lawyer said. He called this place the only corner of the world where truth was still served with coffee. The word stole my breath. For a moment, I could not move. The walls seemed to lean closer, listening. "He wanted you to keep it running," the lawyer added, "to make sure the light never dies here." When they left, the envelope sat on the counter between sugar jars and napkins, simple things made holy by purpose. I opened it slowly. Inside was a short note, handwritten, steady despite his failing health. Kindness built more than walls. It rebuilt me. The world forgot what mercy looks like. You reminded it. Tears blurred the ink before I could finish. Outside, the day went on, cars passing, people rushing, the ordinary rhythm of life. I stood behind the counter, the same place where he once sat, and whispered, "The world remembered you, Richard." And maybe, in some quiet way, it remembered me too.